Here are my picks for today, beginning with The Kid with a Bike by the Darden Brothers. Now, Jean-Pierre and Luc Dardenne are probably among the most respected European filmmakers. They've won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. They've made masterpieces like Rosetta and The Child, and they've made some very dark, very bracing films, often about life in a northern Belgian town. These are guys who are not making happy movies for the most part. This one's a little bit different, though. This is the story of a young boy who's abandoned by his parents. He refuses to accept that, and then he meets up with a young woman who's the local hairdresser. She's played by the great French actress Cécile de France, and they strike up a very interesting relationship, which is maybe a little less bleak than we're used to from the Darden Brothers. This film actually has quite a lot of hope to it. It's again about children, as many of their films are, but it's really about a more inspiring view of what children are capable of when they're faced with very difficult circumstances. Another pick for today is a film called Rose from Poland. Now, this film is set at the end of the Second World War. This is not a story that we've seen very often on film. Usually we see the battles of the Second World War. In this case, we see what happens to the residents of an area in what is now Germany, but these are Polish residents. When the Nazis begin to leave, they're forced out, and the Soviet army comes in. Now, life under the Nazis was horrific. It was awful. It lasted for 5 or 6 years. But when the Soviets come in, it turns out that life is not much better. They don't trust these Polish residents because they feel that some of them have collaborated with the Nazis. They end up abusing the Poles in some ways that are as bad as what the Nazis did. And what happens is that the film shows how that kind of treatment by this new occupying army is even worse for the women. It's a fascinating story. It's a tough drama, and it very much shows you something that you haven't seen before in terms of Second World War films. Another pick for today is called Superclsico. You can really describe this film very simply. It's what happens when an uptight Scandinavian goes to Argentina and loosens up. This is the story of a wine merchant from Copenhagen. His wife has left him. She's gone to Buenos Aires to shack up with a football player. He's angry, he's furious. He decides to go to Buenos Aires himself, and he hates the place. Now, most of us would love to go to Buenos Aires, but this guy doesn't like the Malbec wine, he doesn't like the heat, he hates football, and somehow he has to find a way to win his wife back, even if he's just griping the whole time. It's a lot of fun, and it really shows the clash between those two cultures. Another pick for today is called Warriors of the Rainbow, Sidik Bale. This is an epic, big-budget war movie from Taiwan, and it's a story that we haven't seen much before. It's a story of the indigenous Taiwanese, the native people, essentially, of the island of Taiwan, who fought back against the Japanese occupying army when they invaded just before the Second World War. Now, these are people who are fighting with traditional tools, with essentially the equivalent of bows and arrows, against a Japanese army that's very highly militarized and working with the latest equipment and occupying Taiwan. But they have the spirit of the island on their side, and they've got enormous passion to defend their land. It's a very powerful film. This one may strike you as a slightly odd parallel, but if you liked Avatar, which was again about an indigenous community fighting back against an occupying military force, you will like Warriors of the Rainbow. It's that same dynamic, that same story, and it's as inspiring and in a way as impressive visually as that film was. Another pick for today is called Snowtown. This film is from Australia, and it's tough. Now, this is a movie that is really not for everyone, but if you like your films with a little bit of edge to them, if you're willing to watch something that's a little bit challenging, then I think you're going to enjoy Snowtown. It's based on a true story, the story of a small town outside of Adelaide, Australia, where a terrible series of murders happened, bodies were found, people didn't know who did it, and this film really goes behind that murder story to tell you what happened before those events. It's a story of poor, desperate people who really don't care much about normal society. They're living outside of normal society because they just don't have anything that's worth living for. And it's a portrait of this incredible family as these events creep up on them that lead to this murder. It's almost got a kind of a cult sensibility to it in terms of the leader of this family who feels like a cult leader. And it's dangerous, it's disturbing in many ways, but it's beautifully shot, and I think it tells you something about the darker side of the human spirit.